In 2024, just 25 million passengers passed through Berlin, shockingly low for the political and cultural capital of Europe's largest economy. Even smaller cities like Vienna, Zurich, and Athens saw more passengers. To really get what's going on here, we need to rewind to the end of World War II and the start of the Cold War. After Germany was divided into East and West, the US, France, and the United Kingdom and the Soviets banned German airlines from flying between West Germany and Berlin. But Germany wasn't banned from having airlines altogether. East Germany had Interflug, which had its main operation at Schönefeld Airport, which is the modern site of Berlin's Brandenburg Airport, while West Germany had Lufthansa. So Interflug focused on the Eastern Bloc countries, while Lufthansa focused on Western Europe, and where they also had access to the Atlantic since there were no airspace restrictions. This helped Frankfurt become one of the most powerful airports not only in Europe, but the entire world, while the same was largely true at Munich's airport, thanks to all the wealth in the Bavaria region. But that's not all. While Frankfurt was never Germany's cultural capital, in fact it was heavily bombed during World War II, it became something much more powerful. Germany's financial center. Lufthansa saw this early and made Frankfurt into one of the most powerful airports in the world. And this ties right back into Berlin, because being a political and cultural center capital is great, but being a business center is much more important. But many powerful people still had dreams, especially when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. They hoped an airline like Lufthansa would connect the city to the world just like they had done in Frankfurt. The plan to shut down all the airports in Berlin for commercial passenger use and use Berlin Schönefeld Airport to create Berlin Brandenburg, the old East Berlin airport that once had links to the Soviet Union. Why Schönefeld? Because it had space and lots of it. Its layout was also unique in that it would be able to create a huge hub operation. But what is a hub? Let's say you have a flight from Dresden to Bremen. There's not enough demand between Dresden and Bremen, so what airlines do is they funnel passengers through a central airport, like let's say Berlin, where they have, let's say Prague, Dresden, Warsaw, and so on, and then they combine the demand of all of these cities, and then these passengers can then connect in Berlin, then going to Bremen. So Berlin's new mega airport was designed for this, including concourses where planes could wrap around the entire terminal, maximizing the use of space. And because this layout was even more efficient than airports like Frankfurt, it seemed like there was a real chance that Berlin could become the next powerhouse hub, not only in Germany, but in Europe. Lufthansa at one point still did show interest in developing Berlin Brandenburg into something further around the time it was supposed to open in the early 2010s. They started boosting their presence in the city, along with partner airlines like Swiss and Austrian airlines. But then things fell apart. Berlin Brandenburg's opening was delayed by another decade due to construction problems. That was just one of the problems. And also since Germany's recovery from the recession was, a little sluggish. Momentum faded, and so did Lufthansa's ambition for Berlin. But Berlin did have a hometown airline, Air Berlin. At its peak, it was Germany's second largest airline. After reunification in 1990, Air Berlin jumped on the opportunity to connect Berlin to the rest of Europe and even the world. They launched routes like to JFK and Miami. But pretty quickly, their focus shifted into West Germany. They started routes, added capacity in ones like Hamburg to Munich, one that I flew on many years ago. They handed out little chocolates at the end of the flight. Very classy move. They also merged with an airline called LTU, which had its primary operation at Dusseldorf's airport. This is where they focus a lot of their growth up until their bankruptcy in 2017. It tells us that opportunities in Berlin were limited. There was also another problem where Berlin's Tegel airport was capacity constrained, or at least the infrastructure there didn't allow for a huge hub-to-spoke model. Air Berlin, they could have gone around this a little bit by flying bigger aircraft there, or more of them, but they decided not to do this. Why? Simple economics. Berlin wasn't paying the bills. Sure, the city generates demand, but a lot of it is low-yielding or low-paying tourism demand, where people just want the cheapest flight possible and they aren't willing to pay a premium. Airlines like Ryanair, which offered super cheap flights, were scaling rapidly. And the average Berliner could not say no to this. Where, in other words, Berlin is really unusual, where it's one of the only capital cities where the low-cost airlines have the leverage. And this problem, well, maybe not a problem for the low-cost airlines, was made even more dramatic since all of the other airports in Berlin had to close. So the airlines had to compete more directly at Berlin's Brandenburg airport. And that direct competition is a risk for airlines like Air Berlin and especially Lufthansa, where there's also a big opportunity cost. It's very hard to walk away from a profitable hub that you've spent decades building, especially when you have all the infrastructure there and you have the business travelers, the investment bankers, consultants, there to back you up and to pay those premium fares. But still, Lufthansa had yet another opportunity of a lifetime when Air Berlin collapsed in 2017, which also happened to be the same time when Berlin-Brandenburg was just going to open. And some people got excited since Lufthansa started flying long haul out of Berlin for a very brief time to JFK and Miami. But the much bigger reason here, right, is if Lufthansa would go all in on Berlin, then they would have to shift resources and management focus away from Frankfurt. After reunification in 1990, a lot of people in East Germany moved over to West Germany, so it was already more sparsely populated out of Berlin, out of the metro area, which is unlike what we see over in West Germany. It's more dense, especially in the Rhine region where Frankfurt is situated and where Frankfurt has a great long-haul rail network where people in 2 to 3 hours can reach the vast majority of the German population and the jobs, or within a 1-hour flight to a city like Hamburg. So yeah, a lot of people moved over to West Germany realizing they had family and friends there and they could also use even the same skills that they have and get paid way more. But will this always be the case? Is there still a chance for Berlin? There could be. There's constraints at other airports that are really becoming more of a bottleneck, especially in Amsterdam with their slot cap and for takeoffs and landings, and London Heathrow and their constraint by only having 2 runways. But maybe there's a chance to break this trend that we've seen over the last 70 years. And also, there's, of course, an increase in the cost of living and doing business in major cities, so Berlin can offer, and the surrounding region can offer an attractive alternative, which of course has already been seen in the startup scene. Coupled with this and the space that Berlin-Brandenburg has, that could be super attractive if companies are willing to make the investment. They've got some good techno music there too, I've heard. If you want to watch more videos on aviation travel and stuff like that, then